Hello everyone. Yes, I'm back again and I've decided it's time for another WIP Chat. I have recently watched Rachel Rae's Pack and Chat and I really loved the 90s tag she did, so I told her I was totally going to steal it. And here I am doing it. As you know, I'm a few years older than her, and my take on the 90s were probably bit different because I was basically a teenager in the 90s. Maybe not right from the beginning, but most of the 90s. So yeah, we are back with August from DIYMoon Shop, and as you can see, I've worked a bit on it since the last WIP Chat I did, and today we are working on this section here. Lots of dark colors compared to last time where we did a very light section. And we are going to start out with a very dark color as well. This is 823, I believe, a dark blue. But there's a lot of it in there and I don't have to change colors too much. This is a shorter tag, so I hope it won't be another 2-hour video. But yeah, you basically know me by now. I'm chatty. I'm very, very chatty. But let's get started with this tag. Favorite TV show in the 90s? That's Buffy, hands down. I did not watch a lot of TV during the 90s, but I loved a couple of TV shows, one of them being X-Files, and what else was there to love? Actually, not... can't remember. But my absolute favorite show was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's also the only vampire thing I actually like, so I'm sorry to all the Twilight fans in the diamond painting community, but every time you start talking Twilight, I just shut down. I can't do it, I'm sorry. It's not even the sparkling vampires, although those are ridiculous. It's just the whole thing. But yeah, Buffy was funny, it was different, it didn't take itself too seriously, and honestly, I've been a Joss Whedon fan ever since, so I pretty much love everything he does, because he has this certain type of humor which you can see in Buffy and everything he works on, and I appreciate that. I also liked Angel, the spin-off show they did for Buffy. But not quite as much as I like Buffy. Okay. Favorite 90s song? Okay. I mentioned in my last WIP Chat that I did the boy group thing. In my case, it was Take That. I was a fan from 94 until they pretty much dissolved the band, which I believe was only end of 95, beginning of 96. I can't even remember any longer. But it was a huge drama and I didn't understand why teenagers were threatening to kill themselves because the band just stopped existing. So you probably understand a bit better now why I always found crazy fans a bit strange. I never got them. But my favorite, or my only favorite, my only boy group I listened to in the 90s was Take That. And my favorite song from them was, yeah, I'm going to admit it, Babe. I know, it's super cheesy. I liked it. I was 13, come on. I was allowed to like that. Favorite commercial and advertisement. I basically did not cheat on this. As I said, I heard Rachel do this tag, and I had my own answers in my head right away when she answered this, but I didn't look up anything for this tag except for this, because I wasn't sure if this commercial was actually from the 90s or if it was later. As I've mentioned before, my memory isn't always the most reliable. But I was right. This was actually a commercial that aired in Germany in 97, and it was for Snickers. they did some very funny advertisements on TV about this whole thing. If you're hungry, you're not doing it right and stuff like that. And this was a particular spot showing an American football game. So I believe you might have seen it, because American football is actually not a huge thing in Germany, and especially not back in the 90s. So I guess they just plucked it out from you guys and translated it into German and dropped it on the German market, and it worked. But it was this football player who gets really hit in the head during the game, and his coach asks him a few questions, which he answers correctly until he asks, "And who are you?" And he answers, "I'm Batman." Yeah, I was 16. I found this commercial hilarious. And I still do. I still like it to the day. They have recently picked up doing this type of spots again for Snickers, but they are not as funny as this one used to be. So I like them, but I don't love them. Well, I pretty much don't love commercials anyway. NSYNC or Backstreet Boys? I'm sorry, Rachel. None of the two. I mean, if I absolutely have to pick one, it would be the Backstreet Boys, but I never liked both of them. I was a Take That girl. That just doesn't mix. It was a firm rule back in the 90s. Either Take That or Backstreet Boys. I think NSYNC wasn't really huge over here. I mean, we knew them. And Justin Timberlake is a big star here as well, though I don't get it, I'm sorry. But I think the band NSYNC wasn't that much of a deal. Or I had already checked out by then, I don't know. Favorite music artist? So, my one problem with the music in the 90s was it never clicked for me, and I was never sure why. It was okay, I listened to it, well, most of it, but the mainstream stuff just never was what I was a huge fan of. I mean, I absolutely hated techno and Eurodance and all these other atrocious things that came from the 90s, but I was pretty much alright with any kind of pop. I just didn't want to listen to it, really, if I didn't have to. So my favorite music artist, that's a very hard question. I really didn't have one, except for my short 2 years of Take That love. So maybe let's say Take That. They are amazing artists. I learned to love later in life, but not at the time. Did you collect anything back then, and what did you collect? Oh, I sure did. I collected first these little figurines, which you can get out of the, I think in your neck of the woods it's called Children's Surprise. These little chocolate eggs with a yellow egg inside, and you have some kind of toy. There were always these series of about 10 figurines at a time you could collect, and I collected those. I did not collect the toys you had to put together yourself. I mean, I put them together and maybe I played with them for a few minutes, but let's be honest, those are crap and no one wants them. So that was the thing I collected getting into the 90s. More like mid-90s, there was this mouse which was very popular in Germany, and it was called Diddle. I collected that. They also had figurines and I collected them mostly, but they I think they started with postcards and little notebooks and stuff like that, and I had that stuff as well. Not sure, I think I still have one of the notebooks. Ah, yes. sure do. I got this one from my best friend a long, long, long time ago, and I still have it because you don't throw out gifts from your best friend. So this is Little Mouse. I'm actually not sure if this thing ever went anywhere outside of Germany, but let me know if you know. So after Diddle was done, I collected manga. I was never much of a comic fan, I mentioned that previously, but I did like Japanese comics called manga. They somehow clicked more with me than the regular ones, and in 96 or 97, can't remember exactly when, but I think it was more like 97, they started to appear in our comic shops. The first ones I can remember are Dragon Ball, which I didn't buy, and Sailor Moon, which I did buy. I don't have the whole series. I stopped, I think, halfway through, because there were so many then that I just couldn't get all the ones I wanted, and I had to choose. But by the time I moved out from home, I had a huge collection. I think it filled up a couple of bookcases, and I stacked them in front of each other as well, so there were usually 2 rows in front of each other. That's a lot of manga. And Rachel mentioned in her videos the Beanie Babies, and I did collect those, but I'm pretty sure, at least here in Germany, they came around in the early 2000s and not in the 90s. Pretty sure about that, because I bought most of them around the time I moved out from home, slightly before that, and I took a whole collection of that stuff into my first apartment. And that's about it, because I was always very limited in space. I couldn't collect everything I wanted. I am a bit of a collector, so that's an issue sometimes. But back then I still had it under control. And I think I need to change my wax in here soon. How many Tamagotchis did you go through? Believe it or not, none. All of my friends had them. I didn't. I didn't really want one either. I still remember one of my friends gave me hers for a week or so, and yeah, I played with it, but I found it really stupid. I wanted a real pet. And I think at that time I already had a real pet too. I had my first bunny, and that was much more interesting than the stupid Tamagotchi. So yeah, never had that, never missed it really. Favorite video game and console? That's not just one answer, because my favorite console and my favorite video game are 2 different things. So my favorite console is the SNES. And Rachel, I didn't know they called it SNES in Ireland. That's ridiculous. Even we called it SNES. So that was my favorite console. That was my first TV console I got, and I loved it to death. I played it for hours and hours and hours. And my favorite game for that console was Zelda: A Link to the Past. But it was not my favorite game of the 90s. Because my favorite game of the 90s was Zelda: Link's Awakening, which was actually for Game Boy. And I think I have played this game from beginning to end at least 10 times. It's not as huge as the one for the SNES. That's probably the reason why I liked it better. Because I'm not a gamer. I like gaming from time to time, but I don't spend huge amounts of times on it. And that's always a problem, because I prefer role-playing games and they take up time. So I've never completely played through A Link to the Past, sadly. I still want to do it. My SNES is actually still working, and it's currently with my parents. I think it might stay there as well, because I recently got the SNES mini version Nintendo put out, and the game is on there. So if I want to revisit that and maybe try to play the whole thing, I will use that one instead of collecting the old one and trying to connect it to my very modern TV and anything like that. So yeah, that would be my favorite console and my favorite game, but for a different console. Favorite cereal or cereal-free toy? Any Germans watching this, please correct me if I am wrong, but as far as I remember, we didn't have toys in our cereal. I really don't remember that we did. But my favorite cereal without the toy aspect used to be, for some time, Cine Minis, although I have tried them again in recent years and I absolutely hate them now. So I don't know if they changed the formula or if they were always this disgusting. And then there was something called Clusters, which was whole wheat flakes and little balls of chopped nuts mixed with something else to make them into balls. It was actually not overly sweet, which was a good thing in my book. And I liked that one. I never liked the super sugary stuff, which is probably the reason why I don't like Cine Minis any longer. They are super sugary now. And maybe they always were, but I don't remember them that way. Who was your 90s crush growing up? Ugh, back to the crushes. I didn't have one. Sure, there were actors and singers who I thought were handsome, but I never had these delusions of, oh, he's going to be my boyfriend one day. And I never went nuts like so many teenagers do, so maybe I'm really strange. I don't know. But no, none of that. What was your favorite Disney Channel movie? I didn't have Disney Channel in the 90s. Maybe at the end of the 90s. I didn't have cable period until 93, I think. We got cable when I was either already 13 or nearly 13, so it has to be 93, 94. And before that we lived with 5 channels and we always found something to watch anyway. But when we finally got cable, Disney Channel was not part of the offering. That came a lot later. And by the time that came around, I was no longer interested. Favorite show, Disney, Nick, or Cartoon Network? Yeah, same as for Disney Channel. Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. Nickelodeon, I think we got also around the end of the 90s, and by the time I was no longer interested in it. And Cartoon Network, I'm not even sure if we have that today. So, no idea. No idea, no answer. Weirdest fashion trend? Pretty much everything. Everything related to this whole techno and Eurodance nightmare. These neon clothes made of 100% plastic, these riptides, these silvery metallic pants and platform boots, but not the kind they wore in the 70s, but these, you know, these buffalo boots with these huge, massive and same goes for the makeup. The strange neon colored makeup those techno peoples wore. No, just no. What were your favorite toys you would play with? Well, I guess I mostly played with Barbie when it came to toys. I was a bit of a loner as a kid, so I spent a lot of time by myself, basically. And when I did, I think most of the times I pulled out my Barbie dolls and played with them. And I I built these elaborate houses because I never had much of the furniture, and I never had one of these pretty much useless Barbie houses. I built everything out of my own furniture and out of boxes and stuff I found lying around the house. Yeah, that was really fun. And I came up with all these elaborate storylines, and I would play for hours and hours and hours. It might sound a bit sad, but I was already an introvert when I was a kid, so I was happy with that. And my friend I talked about last time, the one I met when we were very little, she often wasn't allowed to go out. I can't really tell you why, but we always chalked it up to being a thing of they are very strict with her and they are Greek, and yeah, I never got it much. So you basically had to beg her parents to let her go out and play, which was stupid. So yeah. Disney, Nickelodeon, or Cartoon Network? Well, none, like mentioned before. What early morning weekend TV shows would you watch? I still remember when I was still very little, we did indeed have the Disney Club on one of our channels, and that would actually be on Saturday afternoon. But the rerun would be on Sunday morning, very, very early in the morning, something like a few minutes before 7 it would start and then run for 3 hours or something like that. And even though I watched it on Saturday afternoon, I would get up on Sunday morning to watch it again. Which is very dumb. And when we got cable later, I did the same thing, just for different channels and different cartoon content, I guess. It was stuff I had already seen throughout the week and some stuff I couldn't see for whatever reason, and it was all on rerun on Saturday and Sunday morning. And then I hit puberty and I was no longer interested in getting up in the morning. And that all stopped. Favorite McDonald's Happy Meal toy? My parents never took me to McDonald's or any other kind of fast food joint when I was still a kid. My father hated it. He didn't want to eat anything that came from McDonald's or Burger King, or, well, we pretty much only had McDonald's and Burger King back then, I believe. He didn't like it, so we didn't go there. And when I started going there, mid-90s, I no longer did get Happy Meals because I was a grown-up teenager and I wanted a full menu. So no McDonald's toys for me. This is going a lot faster than the last one. We only have 3 questions left. Maybe I should have printed out a second tag. Favorite book? As a kid, I read a lot. Still remember we took a trip to the local library in the first few weeks of 2nd grade. And we got our own library pass, and we could check out books, and I was in heaven. From that day on, I was at the library at least every 2 weeks, and I would rent out books like crazy, and I would read them all. And I think my favorite book series during that time was The 3 Investigators. I read every single one the library had, which is probably not even close to what existed, but everything they had, I've read it. I also had back then it was still cassette tapes. I had those and I loved them to death. But there wasn't a single one I loved the most. I can't really remember if I had one book I loved so much that I would call it my favorite book. No idea. Funny thing about this, I mean, Three Investigators, it's obviously for kids and it's a bit of lighter reading than crime novels for grown-ups. But even though I loved those and read them all, I never liked any kind of crime novel ever since. I find them extremely boring. Just can't read them. And I always found that strange because I started out loving this type of book. But maybe it's because it was more of a light adventure than a real crime, I don't know. On the other hand, I consume real crime documentary like crazy. Explain that to me, please. Anyway. What would you watch when you got home from school? Well, in the beginning of the 90s, nothing. Because like I said, we didn't have cable. We only had 5 channels. And there wasn't much going on these channels. There was on one of them, they had Star Trek The Next Generation. And I know I watched that with my best friend in 4th grade, which was 91, 92. And yeah, we would watch that. But I didn't watch it every day, and I wasn't super religious about it like some other people were. I could just as well just sit down and draw or read or listen to one of my cassettes or play with my Barbie dolls. It didn't have to be TV. But then when we got cable, we also got a channel called Tele 5, and they showed a lot of anime. And I loved those shows. And I know the one that hit me the hardest was one called Lady Oscar. It was about this French nobleman who only had daughters, and during the birth of his last daughter, his wife died. And then he decided on a whim, well, this kid is not going to be a girl, I'm going to raise her as a boy. Yeah, great idea. That's what he did. And they basically, it was a 40 episode show, and they basically went through 20 years of French history, starting at the point where Louis XVI marries Marie Antoinette and goes all the way through to the French Revolution. So the majority of the French Revolution is done in the last 2 episodes, but all the time leading up to that was covered in these other 38 episodes, and I just loved this show so much. I don't know why it touched me that deeply, but it did, and I can't even tell you how many times I've seen it. I've seen it every single time it was on TV, and I got it taped at some point, and then I rewatched that at least 3 times, I believe. And then later I got a not quite so legal copy on DVD, and I believe 3 years ago I finally bought it legally on Blu-ray because it finally came out. Still have that. And yeah, that show, these last 2 episodes, boy oh boy. No matter how often I saw it, it just killed me. It was so devastating. But I went back every time and watched it again. I'm obviously a masochist. Yep. Anyway. It also did something which some parents probably hope all TV shows would do to their kids. It pulled me down the rabbit hole of investigating French history from that area and going very deep. So I was a bit of a French history buff for a while. I probably have forgotten most of it by now because I'm good at forgetting stuff. But yeah, it was also a learning experience, and isn't that nice? So first was this channel, and I still remember they stopped broadcasting after a few days, after a few years. They are back now. Can't remember when they came back, but they are a completely different channel now. Nothing interesting on there except for some very cheesy bad movies. I hardly ever watch it. After that we had a channel called RTL2, and they pretty much took over all the anime stuff, except for one show which I also really love, but I think they lost the license to it, and it's no longer clear who owns the licenses now, because it has never been shown after that. And this show was called Queen Millennia. It's from the same guy who did, I think it was called Captain Harlock. That's something that is more known, even though I have never seen it. I'm so sad that they never showed that again, and I think the licensing thing is still ongoing, because there's also no DVD or Blu-ray for purchase now, and all these old anime series now can be bought on DVD and Blu-ray. So I guess this is still an open issue, which is sad, because that was also very tragic but a very good story. I would like to see that one again. I seem to have a thing about stories with a lot of self-sacrifice going on. Last question. What was your favorite thing from the 90s that's no longer available today? Fanta Pink Grapefruit. Still remember, because back then we didn't have a light version of everything. My mother only allowed me 1 can per day, which was good. I don't blame her. It's a good idea to limit the sugar intake of your kids. And I still remember I would get a whole pallet of it, which was, I think, 24 cans. And every day I came home from school and sat down to watch my episode of Lady Oscar. Back to that one. I would slowly sip that can of Fanta Pink Grapefruit. And I miss it. They took it away at some point, and I think it has never been back. So yeah, a bit sad about that. And that's already it. Oh dear, that's just half an hour. What are we going to do now? Are we actually going to stop? I guess so. So anyway, just wanted to let you know there will be no new videos until next week, because I can't record over the weekend. Well, let's be honest, I don't want to, because the boyfriend will be home and I'm not going to do that when he is sitting around. Probably laughing at me. Why are you on YouTube, woman? But anyway, I will be back next week, probably with an unboxing from one of my sale purchases, because that is really already in Germany and I'm waiting for delivery today, actually. And then I will do another WIP Chat, probably recorded on Monday. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this much shorter WIP Chat. I hope this information was at least somewhat interesting. And if you did enjoy it, I would really like if you could give me a thumbs up, or maybe even subscribe to my channel if you want to see more like this, because there will be a lot more of these kind of videos. I can promise you that. And I hope you have a great weekend, whatever you're up to this weekend. I'm going to meet friends, actually. Woohoo, I'm going out. And it will be exactly like I described in my last video. And yeah, have a good weekend. I hope you get a bit of sun and nice weather, and I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.